I watched your Power and Politics interview, and I you were right about the whole Aaron O'Toole thing. Like this is forgotten history, even though it was only 2 years ago. But you were right about Aaron O'Toole. You were right about Doug Ford. Um, and not only that, it appears to me that the reason why you were ousted from the race in the first place is also because of Aaron O'Toole. Is that true?
In the federal leadership?
Yes.
Yeah, so the two parties are completely different, right? Provincial,
Yes.
the PC party, and then the Conservative Party of Canada. But in the back, a lot of the people overlap. And I saw this federal Conservative leadership race come up in 2020. And I'm watching Peter MacKay and Aaron O'Toole are the front runners. And the other people in the race, Marilyn Gladue kind of had a bit of a profile in Southwestern Ontario. But the others are just, not very well known. And their conservative credentials, their bona fides are not who knows who these people are. And I'm saying to myself, wow, like if we get a Peter MacKay or an Aaron O'Toole as leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, this is going to be bad. This is like big trouble. Luckily, anyway, we can get to how it ended up. They didn't suffer as much at the polls as I thought. So I jumped in the race to both look. It's consistent with what we said: challenge the left, balance the narrative in the leadership, and change the course of this, where the Conservative Party of Canada was going, and also the narrative of conservative politics across Canada. Because when that race started, no one was talking about axing the carbon tax. They were all tripping over themselves to prove who was the biggest liberal, and no one was balancing the narrative. And I jumped in, and they tried their best to ignore me. The National Post was in Aaron O'Toole's pocket for that leadership race, and they tried to dismiss it. I remember reading the articles, like Global News and National Post put out a couple articles about who's in the conservative leadership race in the beginning. And for me, he had a website called Axe the Carbon Tax. That's how they summarized a 2-year campaign to get the PC party to flip on the carbon tax temporarily. They said he had a website he ran called Axe the Carbon Tax. It was so funny the way they were trying to diminish my presence at the campaign. And look, the establishment figures, in hindsight, I realized this is what they were thinking. Well, let him run. He'll never raise the $300,000 entry fee, and he'll never get the 3,000 signatures. And because they could have just blocked me, but they let me run. And we were building, grassroots building. We weren't getting any media coverage. I was the last one to go on Power and Politics. I was the last one to go on, what's the other version, on CBC News. I was the last one to go on The Rebel. Those are the 3 interviews I did. And we were well on course to hit the 300,000. I was in 3rd place. There was some polling being done by the other campaigns. There was another poll that was being done that was made public. And in terms of fundraising, I was also 3rd. And on average donations, I was right behind Peter MacKay and ahead of Aaron O'Toole. And Aaron had all the establishment figures. All the Bay Street money that wasn't with MacKay was with Aaron. And they set me up because I was calling Aaron O'Toole a red Tory, and he was trying to run a campaign as a blue. And they were getting really angry with me. I remember the PC convention provincially happened in Niagara Falls right when the federal race started, right? And I just started getting signatures and donations. And Aaron was there, and I don't think I'd ever met him. And, you see other leadership candidates, you're not going to be a jerk about it. You're going to be friendly, right? Hey, what's going on? And he gave me this glance from across the room, and it was so vicious. Like, he was so angry. And we had just gotten started. I was just saying he's a red Tory. He's like, he was campaigning for Patrick Brown for the carbon tax. He's not a blue conservative. He was so angry, guys. And I remember looking at it and turning to my wife saying, wow, like, this guy does not have the composure to be leader. Never mind prime minister, because if he's upset about a couple tweets and a couple Facebook posts this early in the campaign, he's going to lose his cool whenever the heat gets put on him. So we kept building, and in 4 to 6 weeks, we raised the 300,000. We're in 3rd place. And then the pressure started happening. The calls started coming in my campaign from lobbyists and stuff saying, you got no chance. You can't win this. You need to cut a deal to support Aaron. And I said, why would I do that? I'm in this to win. I don't want to cut a deal to support Aaron. And I didn't take the deal. And they had a spy on my team who told me to send out this email that I had already circulated 4 weeks earlier in a mailing. And this is what the letter was. You could still find it online. It was simple. It was, Walid Solomon is Aaron O'Toole's campaign chair. He was also in charge of the Ontario PC Party when that party had voter fraud going on, and they decided to sue me. And Walid Solomon was at the top of the PC Party decision maker on those decisions. I think he would be bad for the grassroots of the Conservative Party of Canada based on his history. And oh, by the way, here's what he said in the Globe and Mail about Sharia law and Sharia finance. He believes that it's compatible with Canadian laws. And I quoted him and I said, I disagree. That's the extent of what I said. And I added 2 links to Toronto Sun articles written by Tariq Fatah on Sharia finance, Sharia law. So now I'm quoting articles in Post Media, and Post Media is all in on the Aaron O'Toole campaign. And even though the letter was out 4 weeks earlier in the mail, they had a guy on my team who told me, just send it out. You hadn't sent it out yet. So I was like, okay, I wasn't thinking about it. I sent it out in an email, and they made this big stink. An investigation was launched because I was Islamophobic, and I was this, I was that. Yeah, let's get into that, Brendan.
You forgot just that it's not just Islamophobic, but Islamophobic and racist, because you got to pair the two together every time you say it. It's just like you can't say trucker convoy without saying illegal trucker convoy.
Yes.
So, so that happened, and was that something that Aaron O'Toole's team specifically did because they saw you as a threat?
Well, the LEOC and Aaron O'Toole, the majority of the LEOC, which is the leadership organizing committee that ran the race, and Aaron O'Toole, like, they had to get me out of the race. I was in 3rd place, and the combined vote of the final people that were on the ballot, if I was on that ballot in 3rd place, it would have been me, Leslyn Lewis, and Derek Sloan after Peter and Aaron. I think I would have passed Aaron on the first ballot because my trajectory was straight up. And at that play, if I'm in 2nd behind McKay, I think there's a good chance that I get most of the 2nd place votes from Sloan and Lewis, and it's over. Like, it's over, and it comes down to me and McKay on the final ballot. And I think I would have won, but obviously I believe in myself, so who knows? Other people don't think it was possible, but they had to get me off the ballot because the 3 candidates running on the right would have defeated the 2 red Tories, Aaron O'Toole and Peter McKay. So even if you spin it a different way and you say, okay, Jim, he would have fallen back from 3rd place and Leslyn Lewis would have been in 3rd. If I was in 4th, the combined vote of Sloan, Lewis, and Jim would have launched Lewis ahead of O'Toole and McKay. But by kicking me out, a bunch of people said, forget it, I'm done. And it really dampened the spirits of people to participate in that race. But even more nefarious, they didn't want to. So they had all the money that I had raised for the leadership. And that money's either supposed to go to the buy-in to get on the final ballot, and then you can keep raising money, or it goes to pay campaign expenses, right? Because under elections law, you can't pay that money unless it comes from your donors. And the Conservative Party of Canada wasn't going to give me the donations or pay my expenses. So now they were trying to bankrupt me and put me offside Elections Canada law. So I had to go to court, and I went to court to get back on the ballot. I won. It was the first time I know of that someone had successfully sued a political party. Everyone else has failed. So now I've got 2 court victories, I guess, against political parties under my belt by 2020. Not really the kind of thing that I wanted to brag about by the time I hit 40. But anyway, and they kicked me out a second time. And the day that they kicked me out of the race, they paused the race for COVID. That was the exact same day. So the story of me getting kicked out of the race was, overtaken by the narrative of the Conservative Party of Canada pausing the race for COVID. So I went to court, I won, and then they kicked me out a second time when the race started up again. And then 2 months later, they kicked Belinda out of the provincial caucus. Doug Ford did.
Yeah.
And wiped out our whole Cambridge PC board of volunteers, which most of them were on the federal leadership team that we were running out of Cambridge to begin with.
Now, I just have one more question, and then I'll let Rick get a word in. When it comes to Aaron O'Toole, he ended up adopting those carbon tax policies, the carbon tax policy. He ended up adopting scrap Trudeau's very wide and scathing gun ban that he put in, defund the CBC. What was your reaction when he came in with an even worse carbon tax plan than the Liberals had, and he started walking back on all these promises that he made? And it, in my personal subjective opinion, it definitely made a lot of homeless conservatives at that point. But what was your take on that?
So I remember in the leadership, there's been a long history, but he was copying my policies, and they had someone tipping them off on a couple policies, but I would say axe the carbon tax, and all of a sudden they'd rush out, McCain and O'Toole, oh yeah, I'm against the carbon tax too. Oh, sure you are. Sure you are. And then I had a policy, remember in 2020, there was the blockades of the railroads. And I came up with a policy of, to make it illegal to block the railroads and critical infrastructure, right, at a federal level. And it was like an hour later, the O'Toole team op-ed in the National Post. 2 hours later, he came out with an email after I sent out the email 6:30 in the morning. 8:30, O'Toole runs with his. National Post covers O'Toole's promise, no promise for me. So I knew what he was all about. I knew the game plan here. So when he comes out later as the leader and he announces he's in favor of a carbon tax, and I was not shocked. Like, I knew that's why I was in the race, to prevent this from happening. And I knew, like, there was no way this guy was ever going to be the prime minister. And the sad part is, I think most of the people in the conservative brass, like the party brass, they knew it too. Like, you could just tell that they weren't enthused about Aaron O'Toole, and they were playing to lose. Like, that's just as simple as that. They were playing to lose. And so I wasn't shocked, Brendan. I was just really worried that it was going to do long-standing damage to the conservative movement to have this guy there. And I thought that it was going to lead to Trudeau majority having Aaron O'Toole or Peter MacKay as leader. It didn't. So, but now Trudeau's gotten his majority another way with cutting a backroom deal with Singh. So he figured out a way to do it. And look, the Conservative Party of Canada, none of the MPs in caucus decided to say anything. They privately were telling their constituents, oh no, Jim should have been allowed to run. Publicly, they said nothing. And now they're trying to make up for it, right? Like, they got rid of Aaron O'Toole, and you see the leadership going on, and Pierre Poilievre every other day is saying, axe the carbon tax. I'm flattered that he's talking about pipelines and axing the carbon tax. And let's see if he keeps it up. I don't know. But we've decided to focus on provincial politics. And I believe that we can change and influence the narrative, not just in Ontario politics, but federally and nationally in our country, starting from a provincial base, because all politics is local. And I just went through the example federally of how we laid out those principles. And I think we are still doing that. We're changing the narrative.